ladies and gentlemen, before we get started on this week's show, prior to posting it, we actually found out some very devastating news in some ways of the passing of PBA great and our dear friend Barry Gurney. Barry was 71 years old and had passed away after a battle with pancreatic cancer. And, you know, I want to take a second here and talk a little bit about Barry and what he meant to me. And, of course, Eric, you're really good friends with him as well. Brian, you had a chance to spend some time with Barry. And just want to kind of get our thoughts out there, what we knew of the man and the memories we have. Eric, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Well, God, where do I begin? You know, I've known Barry and Joan for almost 30 years. I mean, it's a long time, and the stories are countless. And when he was given this sentence about five and a half months ago, I knew it was going to happen. We didn't know when, but I knew it was going to come at one point. And it was very tragic. And I knew obviously he was devastated. You know, you got a couple aches and pains that don't quite want to go away, and you don't know why. And then when you get as far as I know, in last October and November, he had a physical, and they said he was in great shape. And then he started feeling bad around November, December. And he was hurting in January, and they still couldn't figure it out. And right before he came to bowl the Laughlin Cup, which I believe was like February 1st or February 2nd, somewhere around there, he bowled very well at Laughlin, but he was hurting. Because if you recall, he wasn't sure if he was going to make it because he wasn't feeling well, but he came anyway. He hadn't been feeling well, but he still wanted to come bowl. And he bowled fantastic. He ended up third. He made the show, you know. We did the show with him, and he won his first match, and then he lost the second match, but he bowled great.
Won 2 matches, Eric. He actually won 2 matches.
Oh, did he win 2 matches?
Yeah.
I can't remember, but I know he won. I know he won the first match, and I couldn't remember if he won the second match, but I know he won a couple matches. That's right.
Yep.
And then he lost, and then he ended up third, right?
Yep, ended up third. The reason I remember the second match so well, and we'll get into this in a second, but he shot 260 plus the second game, and you had yelled senior power as he was coming off the lanes.
That's right. Yeah, because if I remember correctly, the left lane for him was really tight, and I kept saying if he could conquer that left lane, he's got it, because the right lane hooked a little more, and I remember he had a decent look on that lane, and that's right. Now I remember. That's right. He beat the kid.
Yep.
He beat the kid.
Beat Chris George out of Las Vegas.
That's right.
And to me, that's one of my all-time favorite memories of being involved with Bowling Evolved, was doing the Laughlin Cup. When you yelled senior power, the look on Barry's face was just this big smile. It was just
well, and like I said, I knew he was hurting, but I thought it was, I thought he had a pulled muscle or a bad sore back or maybe a groin injury or anything. God, who would have ever known it was that? Mm-hmm. And I just think it's kind of ironic, because I think we did that show on February the 2nd, and he passed away on July 2nd. So it's almost like 5 months to the day after he made our TV show that he lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. So it's kind of ironic, and it's just it's a tragedy in a lot of ways, because he was only 71. He's about 24 days shy of his 72nd birthday. And at that point back then, he was already planning on bowling the senior tour again this year.
Yep.
I mean, he'd been out there for almost 21, 22 years. When he turned 50, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to prove some of the naysayers wrong in the San Fernando Valley that said, you're a good bowler, but you're not good enough to bowl against those guys out there. And he wanted to prove them wrong. And he took his early retirement from his job with the city of Glendale, and he went out on the senior tour, and a couple of years later, he got his first title. And he is the first professional bowler to use a Storm bowling ball on TV.
Absolutely.
And that's where it kind of started. Storm kind of got their start out on the senior tour. That's where it got started with. So it's kind of ironic that he was the first person. He was the first person ever to throw a Storm ball on TV, and I think it was a teal Storm, if I remember correctly.
Yep. And
it's just a bit of trivia there. Whoever there it was, and it was him. So it's just kind of he definitely left his mark. He won four national titles on the senior tour. Nothing to sneeze at. That's pretty awesome considering the really great players that are out there. And no, they can never take that away from him. He would always have that. And he was still bowling out there up until till he passed. The last 4 or 5 months, he was still he bowled last year. Even into his 70s.
Absolutely.
That's how much he loved the tour and loved being a professional bowler, loved being a PBA member, and he pretty much loved bowling. He loved all aspects of the sport and the game, and he did a lot of teaching down the stretch in Wood Lake Bowl in Southern California. And he was an admirer of our Bowling Evolved, and he was an admirer of you. He enjoyed reading your stuff, and he was just a fan of bowling. I guess that's probably the best way to describe him. He was and our conversations through the years were unbelievable. And with that, a lot of great stories.
Brian, how about you? What were some of your memories of Barry Gurney?
Coming in after Eric with all that, I mean, I'm definitely the new kid around the block. I did have the pleasure of meeting Barry at the Laughlin Cup when I was up there competing. On a side note, being a big bowling history fan, I just wanted to correct Eric. Yes, he did throw the teal Storm, but that was actually, and a lot of people don't remember, Storm was not the original name. That was actually back when they were producing balls under the High Score product brand, and the bowling balls were called Storm, and then they later moved on to the brand, the company name Storm.
Okay.
I come from the old HSP days, and but moving on, I mean, what an amazing guy. Yeah, the two wins at the Laughlin Cup on the show, I was sitting right next to you guys while you were doing the telecast, and you guys, more so obviously Eric on the left side and the little senior side there, you guys had him as the ultimate winner of that event, and he was just, off that 260, he definitely had the look that the righties didn't have, and then especially the title match between David Haynes and Mr. Farrell, that was definitely a match, but none of the righties that made that show had any look where Barry was. In every shot, he came back smiling.
Yes.
Whether he was high, he was flush. I think he even crossed over, and that was probably one of the biggest smiles. But like I said, I wish I had the opportunity to get to know him more. I mean, I've had a privilege of being a part of Bowling Evolved with you guys. We were, obviously Barry was part of the staff, and, I definitely have, that memory from that weekend. Far for me to say that I knew the guy, especially in company of both Eric and yourself, but that was just an amazing weekend. I mean, every shot came back with a smile. He was talking to everybody. He would talk about some of the good old days on the tour when it was a little different than what it is today.
Yeah, he, it's funny. I remember the first time I knew Barry through Dick Sanders' group, the West Coast Senior Tour.
Oh yes.
And actually, Eric, I believe that's the first time I met you was through that when you came to Laughlin.
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah, and Barry and I should say, I knew him casually because I was working as a tournament coordinator and whatnot, and he had seen me through knowing my father as well. My father being the director of the bowling center, and about two and a half years ago or so, I was writing for a company, Above 180. Brian, you were also part of that group.
Yeah, I am.
Right, for Above 180, and I had an opportunity to sit down with Barry to do an exclusive interview for Above 180, and it was supposed to be like a 10, 15-minute little thing, and it turned out that I ended up talking to him for like 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours. It was so funny because it was like I had known the man my entire life. And Barry was just so enthusiastic about everything. And we had an opportunity that night. He wanted to read my work prior to talking to him. And I showed him the article. And Eric, you've seen it. Brian, I know you have as well, on Steve Cooper and the What Happened to Bowling article.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And he actually had read the What Happened to Bowling article prior to in the California Bowling News. And he's like, that was you that wrote that? I said, yeah. And he he gave me this big smile, and he's like, it's so nice to see someone have that respect for the game still. And from that point forward, it was amazing. And I spoke with Barry as often as I could. Spoke with him on the phone, obviously. Over the next couple of years, he endorsed Bowling Evolved, and it just, man, I get kind of emotional thinking about it, because it just he meant so much to what Bowling Evolved became, and to myself personally. I mean, here's a guy that 4-time PBA Senior National Champion. He holds the senior match play record with 21-3, which I still think is just ungodly when you think about it. But he just was such a lover of the sport and people involved with it, and never had a bad thing to say about really anything other than certain aspects of the game and the way things have changed. But I will always cherish the times I spent with him on the phone, just talking about equipment and talking about scratch bowling and his opinions and his endorsements. And then coming up for the Laughlin Cup, we had known that he wasn't feeling well, and he had told us he was having some issues, but he still made the trip. And one memory I always hold very dear also was, and Eric, I don't know if you remember this or not, was before the tournament started, we were all sitting down in the settee area, and we were just talking about the bowling balls and Laughlin and joking around with each other. And I was giving you a hard time about being the senior, then you were giving Barry a hard time about being your senior. So
exactly. The kidding was quite fun. And, like I said, we did that all the time. We had a lot of fun in that way.
He always had a smile, always a great time, and he always was asking me why I wasn't going back out on tour. He thought I threw a very good ball from what he saw or what he'd heard and whatnot, and just it's a shame that unfortunately things turned out the way they did, and we knew right after the Laughlin Cup that was going to be a very tough battle for him, and obviously it took his life, but I really hope everyone remembers Barry for the man he was, just a great proponent for bowling and just a great individual overall. I can't say anything more than that. I really wish that more people had a chance to know him like I did, and obviously Eric and Brian, in the short time you spent with him, you could get a glimpse of the man that he was.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, with Facebook, there was a lot of conversation, and I wish I can give the person credit to this quote that I saw, but for the life of me, I can't remember. But the person went on to quote and say, "Looks like Earl, Dick, and Tony have some competition," and I don't think that statement could be any more true.
I want to thank everyone for listening to this little piece. We're going to take you into our regular show now. On behalf of everyone involved with Bowling Evolved, and of course, just everybody that has known Barry and who didn't know him, we offer our greatest condolences to his entire family, and we truly believe that his memory will live on forever.